Go. Good afternoon and welcome to the special meeting of the City of Glendale Commission on the Status of Women. Roll call, please.
Chair Burns.
Present.
Vice Chair Kajayan.
Present.
Ex officio Kim. Commissioner Lambalot.
Here.
Commissioner Miller.
Here.
Commissioner Perrion.
Present.
Ex officio Serrano.
Present.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. Next item on the agenda, please.
Next is a report regarding the posting of the agenda. The agenda for the February 29, 2016 meeting was posted on the bulletin board outside of City Hall on or before February 26, 2016.
Introductions and presentations.
At A, we have a presentation on human trafficking, and with us today is Renee Marshall from the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, also known as CAST. I would welcome her up to the podium this time.
Welcome. We were really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Burns, Commissioners, and City staff. Thank you so much for inviting the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking here this evening. I just wanted to go over a little bit about what human trafficking looks like here in the Los Angeles area so that you all have a sense of what that looks like. I have a slide presentation that we'll go through. Just to let you know a little bit about our agency, CAST, we've been around since 1996, and we provide services for victims and survivors of human trafficking, both labor and sex trafficking. We provide social services, legal services, and we also have a 24/7 hotline that anyone can call, whether it's a general citizen or a survivor themselves, and we can provide immediate response no matter what time of day or night that is. We have survivor leadership programs, and then we also do a lot of work on policy and advocacy, always with the input of survivors in the work that we do, and also outreach and training, which is what I'm doing now. So that's what we do here in Los Angeles. So this slide is a picture, a map of all of the survivors that we have had at CAST and the countries that they come from. Citizens of the United States are our primary or place of origin of our survivors, but we also have many from countries all over Central and South America, and particularly Asia as well, with Mexico and the Philippines being the top two countries after the United States that we serve. About 67% of our victims and survivors that we work with are female, and 31% are male, 2% are transgender. Often people don't realize how impactful human trafficking is on men, and so I think sometimes that can be surprising that number is so high that with 31%. This is thought of as something that just affects women and children, but it affects men and the transgender population as well. And about 60% of our clients are trafficked in different forms of labor, and about 36% are victims of sex trafficking, with about 4% experiencing both. So it's just important to also keep in mind that labor trafficking is also a problem here in Los Angeles in addition to sex trafficking. So I want to just go through a quick definition of human trafficking. Often people think that trafficking has to involve the movement of people, and it does not. It can, but it basically is the providing of a person or the harboring, holding of a person through force, fraud, or coercion. So the person is tricked in some way, they're forced, physically forced, or promised a great job that then turns out to be very different. And then for the means of slavery or involuntary servitude. Debt bondage is another thing that we see often, where someone is promised a great job, usually a foreign national who's promised a great job here in Los Angeles, and then they're under a debt to that person, that we're going to provide you this job, you're going to make a ton of money in the United States, but then when they get here, they realize that they're actually not making they're not being paid at all for their work, and then they have this debt, so $20,000, $40,000 that they are expected to pay back, so they cannot leave their trafficker because of that. The only exception to this definition is if a person is a minor and they're involved in the sex industry, force, fraud, or coercion does not have to be shown. So anyone under 18 who's involved in the sex industry is automatically considered to be a victim of human trafficking. So that's something really important for people to recognize it as well. Go ahead. Thank you. So we know that this is very much an under-identified crime. It's estimated that only about 1% of people who are trafficked are ever discovered to be trafficked, and that's a both globally and national number, that 1% number. According to the U.S. State Department, somewhere between 14,000 and 18,000 humans are being trafficked in the United States annually. Again, we don't know how accurate that number is because it's such an underground industry. And Los Angeles, we know, is one of the top 4 areas in the country for human trafficking. This map is a map from the Polaris Project, which is a national hotline, and you can see that the Los Angeles area is a very dark red because it's one of the top areas where they get calls of people being trafficked. So who are trafficked and enslaved persons? It's men, women, and children, as I mentioned, varying ages. Often people think that it's just the very young, but we've had anything from very young children to the elderly as well. Varying levels of education. It's often thought that this only happens to people who are uneducated, but we've had many clients who have college education, who have elite degrees. One of our clients had been to college for several years in her home country of the Philippines before she was trafficked here to the United States in the healthcare industry, working in a retirement home. And they may be U.S. citizens or they may be voluntary migrants. So who are the traffickers? Organized crime and gangs is one of the major areas that we see here in Los Angeles as well as nationally. Also neighbors, friends, family members, village chiefs, returnees. It's often someone the person knows. It's not some person who abducted them off the street. It's a friend or someone that they know is often the trafficker. Here in California, agricultural operations. We have several clients right now who came from a Christmas tree farm where the men who were working on the farm were forced to live outside in tents that were not adequate, not given enough clothing to protect them from the elements, given rotten food to eat, not paid for their work. Owners of small and medium-sized businesses, so common businesses that we see, nail salons, massage parlors, restaurants actually are a place we see a lot of trafficking. And often families, so that's where we see a lot of domestic servitude cases where someone is hired as a nanny or to take care of the family, to do the cleaning and cooking for the family, but then they end up prisoners in these homes where they're not allowed to leave and not given a day off, and they're on call 24/7 for the family. So people are recruited in many different ways. We mentioned acquaintances and family, but also labor brokers. So an example of that would be a client that we had who was at a job fair in the Philippines, in the hotel industry, where all of the major hotel names that you would know were there. But he went to a labor broker who then as I mentioned earlier, promised a great job, we'll take care of your visa, your passport, don't worry about that. But then when he got here, was forced to live in a small house with 20 other men, with one small bathroom that didn't work very well. They were not allowed to leave. They were surrounded by armed guards at all times and not paid for their work. And he was able to escape, and luckily the person knew of CAST and connected him with CAST. Some of the pathways for entry for commercially sexually exploited children. This is sort of the area that people are starting to know more about with human trafficking, is the trafficking of young children for sex. So this often starts off as seduction and coercion of older man sort of posing as a boyfriend and saying, "You're so beautiful, I love you, this will be great, we'll make a lot of money." And then it turns into an abusive situation, starting off with lots of gifts and lots of praise that then turns abusive, violent, and the young person doesn't have a choice anymore in the matter. Particularly here with Hollywood and Los Angeles, false advertising for modeling, acting, dancing opportunities. You're going to be a star, you're going to make your family happy and proud. And often this enticement comes through chat rooms and social media where the traffickers are particularly targeting young women, usually, sometimes young boys too, but mostly women, young women, who look like they have low self-esteem, who look like they're not getting along with their family or their friends. They're being isolated and bullied in some way. Those are the young people that the traffickers will be targeting. Peer recruitment is another thing we often see, that it's not actually the trafficker who's doing the recruiting, but it's the other young women that he's controlling, having them go out and recruit other young women. That, oh, have you met this guy? He's really great. He can buy you lots of things. This will be fun. You should join us. And then getting them involved in that way. And then also, of course, violence and force, kidnapping, and parents selling children. So in terms of identifying victims, often the media portrays trafficking victims as being bound in chains or they're prostituting on the street. And sometimes it can look that way, and you can go ahead with all the pictures. There's 5 of them. More common, though, these are people that we're running into every day of our lives. There's 2 more pictures. So someone peddling on the street, peddling flowers, peddling candy, peddling fruit, agricultural workers, your restaurant server in the restaurants you go to, or the people in the back of the restaurant preparing the food. Homeless youth are highly at risk, both young women and young men. It's estimated that they're within 48 hours of being on the street, they're approached for sex by someone. This really is just people that all of us are running into every day, and we may be talking with them and interacting with them and not even realizing it. So some of the signs, indicators and red flags for sex trafficking, that often they can have excess amounts of cash for young people that seems out of the norm for what they should be having. Hotel room keys, hotels are often where the sex trafficking is happening of young people. Being chronically runaway and homeless for the reasons that I just mentioned before. Signs of branding and tattoos. Often the traffickers or pimps will brand the young women with tattoos, their logo or their name in some way that's very prominent on their body somewhere. Drastic changes in behavior and dress and relationships with older men, very controlling boyfriends, those are all red flags. And then for labor trafficking, signs of physical and psychological abuse, working excess hours, never having a day off, working to pay off a debt, feeling as if they can't leave their situation because they are indebted to this person, being isolated and not allowed to communicate with their family and friends, scripted communication that they're told exactly what to say. So one of our survivors was always told, if someone asks you when your day off is, you always say tomorrow, tomorrow. And that was a situation where it was the neighbor. She was in a healthcare facility. It was the neighbor who noticed that she was working every single day and asked her, when is your day off? And she always said tomorrow. And the neighbor realized tomorrow never seems to come because she's here every day. And he luckily contacted the FBI, who got involved and was able to get her and her coworker out of that situation. But it was just an average citizen who noticed that this doesn't seem right and contacted someone. And that's how many of our clients that come to us is just good Samaritans who took the initiative to speak out. Inconsistencies in story is very common, and also not having their ID, so passports, driver's license, all of that identifying information being taken away from them, which ties them to their trafficker. So as I mentioned, we have a 24-hour hotline, 888-KEY-TO-FREEDOM or 888-539-2373, and then there's also the National Human Trafficking Hotline as well, which is 888-373-7888. We do not rescue, so that's important to know too. So if someone is in immediate danger, they're still with their trafficker, they're trying to get away, we always advise to call 911 in that situation. But if the person is in a safe location where we could come meet them, then our hotline or the national hotline are both appropriate. So thank you. That was all I had for my presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Burns. Thank you very much
You're
for
welcome.
this informative and educational information that you share with us. I think this make us be aware what's happening in our surroundings, especially in Los Angeles that you mentioned. I think every one of us has to share this information with our relative friends. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, and it's important to know that this really is happening all over in Los Angeles. For time, I left out a slide that showed all of the different cities in the Los Angeles area where this is happening, and you really can't. It crosses socioeconomic lines, it crosses ethnic lines. It really is happening everywhere in Los Angeles region. Yeah.
I would like to ask if 1% is recognized, how do we get the numbers 14 to 18 then?
That's a good question. That's really a question for the State Department. That's an estimate of how they, and I'm not sure how they track that. I'm sure it's a combination of probably the National Human Trafficking Resource Center and law enforcement around the country. I'm not sure exactly where they get those numbers, but they do know that we don't know. We all know that coming up with numbers around whether it's global or national or local, it's all an estimate because the problem is so big that we really don't have any idea and so underground.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall, for this very informative report. I was wondering if there was any way, if we knew how much of this in the LA County is maybe occurring in our city? In the city of Glendale, is there any way of knowing that? Or?
Yeah, I actually tried to from our database to see if we had those numbers, and it wasn't really clear often where the trafficking was happening. We do know that we have victims who are living in Glendale now that we work with, and particularly where the trafficking happened, we don't always know exactly. So, but knowing what I know about of how widespread it is in the county, I would be shocked if it's not happening in Glendale.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have no set statistics.
I don't have a set statistic, and even if I did, it would just be our clients. It wouldn't necessarily mean what is happening because there are different organizations who do work with trafficking victims. So even that wouldn't be extensive either. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next item, please.
At 2 is oral comment. The discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. The commission may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or discussion. Staff may refer the matter to the proper department for investigation and report. We have no cards, Chair Byrne.
Well, then we will move along to the next item on the agenda, please.
At 3, under consent items, A is approval of the minutes of the special commission meeting held on November 16, 2015.
Are there any changes that the commission would like to make to the minutes, or is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I move to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioners Kojayan,
Yes.
Lambalot,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Carrion. Yes. Chair Burns.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next item, please.
4 is our business agenda. Under A, action items. Number 1 is a presentation of the final draft of the 2015-16 City of Glendale Commission on the Status of Women's Report on the Status of Women and Girls by Mount St. Mary's University. At A is a motion providing direction regarding the final draft of this report. Would you care for a brief introduction from staff?
Yes, would you please provide a report for staff?
Sure. Chair Burns, members of the Commission, last year as part of your strategic plan, the Commission approved a partnership with Mount St. Mary's University to produce a report on the status of women in Glendale and approved the establishment of an ad hoc committee to work on this report alongside City and Mount St. Mary's staff. The report provides information on demographics, education, employment and earnings, veterans, poverty, health, safety, and leadership. At the last meeting in November, a partial draft report was presented to the Commission, which included findings on demographics, education, and employment and earnings. Tonight we have Kimberly Kenny, Associate Vice President of the Institutional Advancement, and Dr. Eleanor Siebert, both from Mount St. Mary's University, who are here to present the remainder of the report to the Commission. With this report comes the final draft of the report on the status of women and girls for your consideration, and the Commissioners may provide any feedback prior to its approval. Once the report is approved by the Commission, it will go to City Council for final approval, and at this time, staff anticipates that the report will be presented to Council the evening of Tuesday, March 22nd. And this report, after being approved by City Council, there will be a press release drafted about it. It will be distributed to city executives, community partners of the Commission, and it'll be posted on the Commission's website. And with that, I will invite Ms. Kenny and Dr. Siebert to the podium. Okay. Dr. Siebert will be taken over.
Well, thank you for inviting us back to share the last part of this report with you. I think you have copies of it, or you have received it, and we'll look forward to getting your feedback on this draft by email. But I wanted to go through some of the highlights, with the next slide, just to remind you, as Christine just did, today we're going to talk about veterans, poverty, health, safety, and leadership. And I do want to remind you that we're looking at a collection of data points to draw a general conclusion. When we have a small population size, as we sometimes do, and looking at very specific areas, the less reliable the conclusion. And to remind you that anytime you use a number, you're looking at a snapshot of a point in time. The numbers change with time. They depend on how the data are collected and how they're scaled. So most of our data come from the Census Bureau. But even the Census Bureau has several ways of collecting data. And I think that some of you have noticed that the population of Glendale has varied from what we give in our report to what some of you have seen. The number that we use comes from the American Community Survey, and that number is one that is based on the 2010 census, and it is updated by a series of surveys carried out in over the year, so that then the modeling goes to integrate those more current results with the census data. The other survey that gives population is called the Current Population Survey. That's done every month, and it is a snapshot of that month's data. And what that is, it's actually carried out by the Census Bureau, but it's sponsored by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And it's mostly used for labor market information. So we use the American Community Survey data, and the reason we do is because it is a more stable number for an annual average, and because almost all the other variables we're interested in come from that database. So I just wanted to let you know that. In the course of interpreting data, there will be times when the numbers are derived from data tables, and in every time you make a calculation, take a number, convert it to a percentage, or a percentage and convert it to a number, there are rounding errors. So what we will find is that the numbers that we give are generally good to better than 3%, okay? And every census table has a margin of error. If I use a number, or if we use a number from a published source, we will sometimes round it off, but we will never we'll never pretend like it's more precise than it has been reported. Okay, so I just wanted to remind you of those things, those tricks about dealing with numbers. Okay, so let's go to veterans. And here what you see is that 3% of Glendale's population has served in the military. It's about 4,400 Glendale citizens. 49 of those are women. So if you look at that little tiny slice, that's all the veterans out of the Glendale population, and the women comprise 1/100th of that. So when we talk about veterans in the report, we have to talk about the veterans as a group. But you have to remember that that's 99% of those are male. That tiny sliver, however, of Glendale's population tends to be better educated, have a higher rate of employment, a higher median income, and a lower rate of poverty than the non-veteran population. We have in the next slide some results of a 2014 study of 2,000 veterans in Southern California. So this is throughout the Southern California area. They've identified the public services that they are most in need of. Over half of these have identified employment, education, and health care as areas where the services are needed. And this needs assessment focused particularly on the needs of those who are just transitioning out of the military. So it's not heavily impacted by older veterans. Poverty is the next one. And poverty is defined in this report based on those whose annual incomes fall below the federal poverty level. I mention that because the federal poverty level does not account for differing costs of living in different parts of the country. So for a family of 4 with 2 children under the age of 18, the federal poverty level in 2014 is just about $24,000. So that would be the annual income. If an annual income of that family falls below $24,000, then they are considered as living in poverty. Now, the poverty rates in Glendale are lower than those in the county and the state. That's 17% for Glendale, 19% for the county, and 18% for the state. Across the U.S., the poverty rate is 16%. I've pulled out the numbers for women here, and in all cases, you can see that the red bar is higher than the green bar. So the poverty rate for women is higher than the poverty rate for men. Looking at some of the targeted groups in Glendale on the next slide, you see that while the poverty for women of all ages is 17%, that's the rounding up of 16.8%, 20% is a poverty rate for women who are 75 years and older. I think that might be significant if you're considering your programs for the elderly. And poverty for families is important to note also. Where there are children under 18, the poverty rate actually increases for families. For married couples families, that rate of poverty is 20%. Where you have a household that's headed by a single woman who has children under the age of 18, the poverty rate jumps to 29%. I'd like to mention the homeless in the next slide. In the 2015 count, there were 208 homeless persons in the city of Glendale. I think it's unfortunate that the majority of those, 59%, were unsheltered. That is, they were living in cars or abandoned, cardboard boxes on the street. 85 of those were women and girls. 51 are women and girls who are actually in family groups. And as we'll get on further in the report to safety or violence, you'll see that 52 women and children among the homeless were there due to domestic violence. The next area was health. Here's a good story. You have a good life expectancy. A girl born in Glendale at birth can expect to live to 84 and a half years of age. That is a longer lifetime than the county and also the state. You'll see that Glendale women outlive Glendale men by quite a bit. That's almost 5 years there. And if you make it as a woman, if you make it to 65 years of age, you get another 3 years to go. So that's good news, I think. There are, of course, deaths, and in the leading causes of deaths over the period from 2000 to 2012 for Glendale women are just like they are for those in the state and across the nation. They're from heart disease and cancers. Those are the two leading causes of natural death. I've put men's statistics up here also to point out that women are more likely to die from strokes than men. And of particular emerging interest is the death rate from Alzheimer's disease. Women here are twice as likely to die from Alzheimer's as men are. The next slide is safety. Glendale's a pretty safe city, and I hope you appreciate that. The citizens of Los Angeles are 5 times more likely to be impacted by violent crime than a citizen of Glendale. You see the number of violent crime offenses. Of interest here, I think, is that the majority of violent crimes fall under the category of aggravated assault. The next most common is robbery. Next slide. And the crimes that disproportionately impact women are domestic violence, sexual violence or rape, and human trafficking. And I've put the national statistics on this so that you can see how disproportionately women are impacted. So in the next slide, we focus on domestic violence. These crimes generally fall as a special category of assault, most of them aggravated assault, a few of them simple assault. Calls for assistance in domestic violence situations are tracked by the Glendale Police Department. They are actually reported to the State Office of the Attorney General and then to the FBI's Uniform Reporting System. So the statistics on calls for assistance with domestic violence are pretty well documented. What you can see here is a very slight decrease from 2006 to 2014. Of course, that decrease is by no means linear because of that big spike there in 2010, and it really is a spike because in 2009 and 2011, they would fall almost on a straight line there. So I don't know what happened in 2010, but I hope it doesn't happen again. The next slide shows rapes in Glendale. Rapes account for about 5% of all of the violent crimes. They average about 12 of these rapes a year over the period from 2010 to 2015. Again, it's not a direct or linear decrease. In fact, it's hardly changed at all from 2006 to 2015, as you can see. And finally, we have the human trafficking. You've just heard a very informative presentation from the Coalition Against Slavery and Trafficking, CAST LA. I took these numbers from their 2014 case log, where they had more than half of their cases were for labor trafficking, 60%. I think that's consistent with what you heard, and 38% for sex trafficking. In that particular year, 71% of the victims were women. And then going to another good news story in terms of leadership. Women have been woefully absent from higher levels of decision-making in large publicly held companies. There is a study done of the 400 largest publicly held companies in California. That's called the California 400. And women account for just over 10% of the 5 highest paid executives among those companies. 4% of those companies have a female CEO or a president. I mention that because 5 of the 400 companies call Glendale home. And 2 of them, that's 2 out of 5, or 40%, have a female CEO or president. And they all outpace the state in having women represented among the highest paid executives and serving as board members. You can see it on the slide. And the other aspect of leadership that we look at, I did want to mention this. The report also looks at privately held companies. And there are about 28,500 of the privately held companies in Glendale. 43% of those are either owned or equally co-owned by women. I always find that speaks to the entrepreneurship and the creativity of women. And then the last slide is political leadership. And again, women have been underrepresented in elected political offices. It's certainly true at the national level and also at the local levels. Here are some points about Glendale. You're represented in the state senate by a woman and in county politics by a woman on the board of supervisors. So that's 2 out of 3 of the elected officials representing you, the city, and the county and state policy-making bodies. On the elected city council, when I looked at the data, women comprised 40% of those elected seats. That's compared to a 28% statewide average. Christine was able to supply us with the information that nearly 1/3, or 32% of Glendale's boards and commissions are women. And in terms of the Board of Education, those are elected, 80% are women. And across California now, school boards are the body, the publicly elected body where there's greatest gender parity. But that's 47% across the state. We care about political representation and political activity of women because these bodies set the political agenda and they drive policy discussions. Our contention is, I think we share this with you, is that a diverse elected political sector which utilizes the talents of both women and men will benefit not only women and their families, but drive a vibrant society to the benefit of everyone. Glendale is well positioned with a strong force of working and educated women to lead the city and the county in neutralizing some of the persistent gender gaps we've outlined in the report. I want to thank you for your action in addressing these issues, and it's been a pleasure to work on your city, get to know you.
Thank you. This item is open for discussion now.
I'd just like to thank Mount St. Mary's for the terrific job and also commend the ad hoc committee who worked on this. It's great to have this product coming from the commission. Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I was reading very carefully this report, and I found out it's very detailed statistics. And I found out some of this statistics, it's until from 2009 to 13. Is this report, it's a recent statistics?
Yes. Now, some of the, when you get down to a very small geographical area and your population size is small, what the Census Bureau does is to aggregate data over a time period. And so the latest data that were available were from the 5 years up to 2013.
Okay. I think this report is, you have the information until 2014. Mm-hmm. Are we going to get any refreshing this information with insert for next year?
Well, we have the local excuse me, I think, I've been working on about
Yes.
3 reports simultaneously. I think we have the 2015 data from your local police department. So that is up to date in terms of being at the end of 2015. However, those reports aren't certified, if you like. That is, they're subject to change up until the point that they get entered into the FBI system. So we have to view those with a little bit more of a flexibility, if you like, a less certainty. But I think I have those. And the other area I would suggest looking at again is the unemployment rate, which has changed dramatically. And I can get you some data on that.
What my concern is this report, when it's been approved, we are going to send to different organizations. Is that correct? Okay, how about next year? Are we going to get updated, or are we doing the updates, or my concern is with like next year, 15, 16 information, is it going to be inserted in this report? We are going to mail it to them, new reports, or how this will work?
I will just insert this. The changes from year to year normally are not reliable. I mean, you saw the calls for domestic violence. If you compare over a 5-year period, you can see more or less some kind of trending. But if you're 1 year to the next year, often it may be a blip. So we've been doing a state report for the last 5 years, every year, and a lot of that data stays the same. So what you need to do is to look for different things those data might be telling you. So if I were in your shoes, I would say there may be some things worth looking at on an annual basis, but be selective.
Thank you.
We look forward to getting all your feedback. I think that, Christine, you have a way of doing that by email through Christine?
Yes.
As we actually prepare the final report.
Commissioner.
Chair Burns, I have a question for the speaker. Hello.
Hi, Denise.
It was great to work with you on this report and the entire commission. We're all very grateful for the work that's been done. 2 specific questions. Now that, when is the state, isn't it coming up in March where you actually speak about the state report? Okay.
March 30th is the public event.
The public event. Okay, March 30th at Mount St. Mary's, right?
Well, it's actually, the public event is held at the Skirball Center on the west side of town.
Got it. Okay, and so when you do that state report, now that we're one of the cities that has this report, are we a part of that? Do they break it down into the cities, or do they?
We do not break the state report down, but I would invite Kim up to talk to you about your role. You're certainly all invited.
Well, I do have one more question, if I may.
Sure.
So, aside from that, I guess what I'm most interested, because you're the lead researcher on this and you really dug deep when we asked you to, and it's been great. How many other cities have done this particular? How many women's commissions approximately?
And they're all customized. Pasadena did one. The county has done one. And it was not for a commission, but we did do one for Kern County as well. That was for a women and children's fund to help establish their funding priorities, to get the data background they needed.
And the follow-up to that, which is the final.
Oh, Lord.
And the city
of LA.
And the follow-up to that question, which is the concluding question, is there anything as a researcher that specifically stood out in your mind about Glendale when you think comparatively?
Well, I hope I've conveyed that to you. I think that the women in Glendale have a very positive story to tell in many areas, and what you want to do is to focus on those areas that still you'd like to make better. The educational attainment of the women here is really good. The wage gap is, in terms of full-time working people, is virtually it's disappeared in 2014, but who knows whether that is something that will continue. So, as I said, I think you've got a highly educated group of women, you've got an active group of women, and I think there's a lot that can be done and a lot to be said for it. Maybe it is a jewel of a city.
Thanks.
Sure, Commissioner?
I just want to echo all of you and thank you for the detailed report you've provided us for us to be able to work off of.
I did want to address Commissioner Miller's question about the report event, and I will make sure I send an invitation to you, Christine, to send to the entire commission for the event on March 30th.
I believe we.
Yeah.
Oh, you have it. Okay, you do.
We have it. Mm-hmm.
One thing that we are going to do at this event, this is our 5th year doing the report, and as Eleanor noted, we've been doing this annually. This year we're going to take a global, a national, and then a local perspective, local meaning state. So we're going to go global, national, and statewide. I know the mayor of Los Angeles will be there because we're just wrapping up that research project. That's been a 2-year project with the city of LA. A little more extensive and involved in the city of Glendale. But I do think this is an interesting opportunity as we move forward to involve the commissions in a deeper way with Mount St. Mary's and the research that we plan to do, because we are continuing to get requests. And next year, our focus, I think, is going to be a deeper dive into specific issues, and we're looking at women's health next year. And I just want to say that out loud as we begin to look at partnerships and begin to look at ways to work together, ways to highlight the work we've already done, the ways to highlight something that may be happening in the city of Glendale around health. So I hope all of you will be able to attend on March 30th. This has been a fantastic process with all of you in the ad hoc committee, and especially working with Christine. So we're really grateful and look forward to finalizing the product.
I think me and Chair Burns, we are attending March 30th.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much.
Are there any more discussions? May I have a motion on this item, please?
This is very important item.
Are we, Chair Burns, just for clarification, are we accepting this draft as stated here today, or are you directing the commission to go away and provide comments?
I think we would have to ask Christine Powers.
Staff can take comments if you want. It would be nice to have them here so they could be reflected in the report. And staff can also further look through, and any editing, last-minute editing before it goes to council will be occurring. So if there are any changes, please let us know this week.
So can we make a motion to approve this draft barring any non-substantive changes? Can we do something like that? So that allows us, if there's any edits that come up. I've been through the report, so it's sort of a moot point for me, but for any of...
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I do believe that individual commissioners have directed comments to or communicated with Ms. Powers on any potential comments they may have had. I do think that there are some additional last-minute review items that Ms. Powers wants to communicate with the presenters. And so I think at this point, if you don't have any substantive changes, then it would be appropriate to give direction to staff to finalize the report and then prepare it for presentation to the City Council.
Okay, then I make a motion that we give staff direction to finalize the report with a few changes so that we can present have it presented to City Council.
Is that a second?
Yes, I second that.
Roll call, please.
Commissioners Kojayan,
Yes.
Lambalot,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Carrion,
Yes.
Chair Burns.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And next item on the agenda, please.
At 2 is consideration and discussion of the Commission on the Status of Women's Legislative Agenda, and at A is a motion providing direction regarding the list of bills as presented. Staff would be happy to provide a brief report.
Thank you.
The beginning of this year, Chair Burns, member of the Commission, brought on a new legislative session in the state of California, and staff has been monitoring this legislation for the Commission based on its adopted legislative platform, which is presented to you in this report. The last day to submit bills in the state legislature for this year was Friday, February 19th, and as such, there are hundreds of bills that poured in on the very last day that the Women's Caucus has yet to go through, staff and our lobbyists have yet to pour over, which weren't analyzed in time for this report, but there are some that were presented earlier in the calendar. The ones that were submitted at the last second will be provided in an update at your May meeting. For this one, though, exhibits 2 through 6 should hold all the bill language, but I will go through each of them and summarize them. The first is AB 67, Assembly Bill 67 from Gonzales, is double pay on the Holiday Act of 2016. This bill requires an employer to pay at least 2 times the regular rate of pay to an employee at a retail and grocery establishment to work on Thanksgiving Day. They refer to that as family holiday here. It only applies to employers with over 500 employees, and so it would not affect small businesses here locally. And this bill falls under the Commission's Women in the Workforce portion of the platform, and staff recommends support. The next bill for your consideration is Assembly Bill 717, which is Gonzales again. It's sales and use taxes exemption for diapers. This bill would provide some tax relief for California families who must incur the additional expense of acquiring diapers in the course of raising small children. It would exempt infant and toddler diaper purchases from the sales and use tax and put diapers in the same category as food because it is considered by the bill's author a health necessity. According to the California State Board of Equalization, the fiscal impact of this bill would be an annual state and local revenue loss of $36.2 million. This bill falls under the Commission's Women in the Budget portion of the platform, and staff recommends support. Next is Assembly Bill 1561 by Garcia, and this is a sales and use tax exemption for sanitary napkins. This bill would exempt them from the sales and use tax, and the author considers the current taxation of these products as being taxed for being women. That's a quote. And according to the California State Board of Equalization, the fiscal impact of this bill would be an annual state and local revenue loss of $20 million. And this bill does fall under the Commission's Women in the Budget portion of the platform, and staff recommends support. Next is House Resolution 35 by Garcia, and this is relative to Women's History Month. And this resolution asks the legislator to join the California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls to honor the contributions of women and proclaim the month of March 2016 as Women's History Month. And staff recommends support. And additionally, it is not a specific bill, but the California Legislative Women's Caucus has written a letter to the governor in which they address the lack of access to quality, affordable child care in the state of California, and they have asked the governor for $800 million in the 2016-17 budget in order to serve tens and thousands of children. Staff would recommend the Commission consider supporting this endeavor as it falls under the Commission's Women in the Budget portion of its legislative platform. Staff respectfully requests that the Commission provide direction on this list of bills that have been presented, along with the California Legislative Women's Caucus efforts to advocate for child care. Whichever bills the Commission wishes to support will be presented to City Council at a future meeting for their consideration and ultimate approval, and any letters of support or opposition would be signed by the Mayor on behalf of the City Council and the Commission. That concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioners, are there any questions? We're looking at four alternatives. Alternative one would seem to be the correct one for us to deal with. May I have a motion?
I'll make.
Do we need one? Since this is informational only.
No, this is an action item, Chair Burns.
Thank you.
I will make a motion to approve the tracked bills as presented.
I second.
May we have roll call, please?
Absolutely. Commissioners Kojayan,
Yes.
Lambalot,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Perrion.
I do have a question. The last piece that you talked about for the $800 million for the child support, that's not part of the bills at this point, right? Or is it?
No, that's for women.
I would
I don't know.
Has yet to release the bills. So if we were to vote, we're not voting for that
It
one
would be
right
for
now.
the tracked bills. At the next meeting, the commission can consider whether you'd like to submit a letter in support of the Women's Caucus. But yes, this would be for the tracked bills.
Okay, then yes, thank you.
And Chair Burns. Yes?
Roll call?
We're doing, yes, I'm sorry, you were the last one, so roll call,
Yes.
yes? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Ms. Powers, I have a question for you, if I may. On this particular item, the legislative material, did the Paid Leave Act or the legislative material submitted by Assemblymember Gomez, did that make this legislative session?
I'm not sure, I would have to check on that.
Could you just look into that and see the relevance in relation to us and let us know if you would be making a recommendation for that to be one that we might consider?
I believe there was a series of bills on that subject. Some of them didn't have assembly. I know Senator Jackson had something similar to that had yet to be released and didn't have a bill number, but I will check on Gomez paid leave. Mm-hmm. Okay, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Lambalod, as the Commission's representative to the ACCW, could you please provide a report at this time?
Chair Burns, would you like to take that item out of order, or should we move on to the next item about Camp Rosie?
Number 3. Camp Rosie we have now.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Happy to make my report now, whatever you'd like.
No, we'll do Camp Rosie next.
This is the item.
Thank you.
Business item 3 is consideration and discussion of potential partners for Camp Rosie. At A is a motion providing direction regarding potential partners for Camp Rosie. And staff would be happy to provide a brief report.
Thank you.
So for several years, the Commission on the Status of Women implemented its signature program, Camp Rosie, a camp that I know many of you are familiar with, a leadership skills camp for young women and girls in the city of Glendale that was developed for girls between 12 and 18 in order to empower them to make personal, educational, financial, and career choices from an expanded set of possibilities. It was offered in 2 3-week-long intensive summer sessions and introduced participants to education and training in a holistic approach to self-development that included financial literacy, self-empowerment, fitness and nutrition, self-defense, healthy relationships, and non-traditional careers. Due to various factors, most notably an imminent threat of a lawsuit by a national organization, Camp Rosie is no longer being offered by the Commission on the Status of Women in the city of Glendale, and 2014 was the last year that the program was in operation. During the strategic planning meeting held by the Commission in 2015, members of the Commission expressed interest in finding a community partner that could take over the program on an ongoing basis. One of these options for you has to do with the YWCA of Glendale. So last year, staff had begun conversations with the executive director of the YWCA to determine their interest and ability to offer Camp Rosie to the community. As explained in the report, the YWCA was not able to take on Camp Rosie in the summer of 2015, and nor for unforeseen reasons are they able to offer Camp Rosie this summer. They have, however, expressed a very keen interest in considering Camp Rosie as part of their program for 2017. At this point, they need to hire a new executive director. They're in the process of doing so. They anticipate having one on board by this summer, and once they secure a new executive director, they will go on to do their own strategic plan. And at that point is when they would like to consider Camp Rosie. That being said, in communication with YWCA staff, they've indicated that they believe they're a good fit for the program, and they would very much appreciate being considered to take it over. Another option that came along in research by staff is having instead of a summer day camp, would be to find a community partner that could hold a one-day teen conference that contains the various elements of Camp Rosie. And one such existing program out there is the Teen Girl Empowerment Day offered in the north end of Glendale. This was held back in 2014 at the Firehouse Youth Center on the property of St. Luke's of the Mountains. The event aimed to mentor young women and was hosted by a very popular lifestyle blog for women that attracts 85 million global visitors called Pop Sugar. The event was scheduled as a day full of workshops for the girls to interact with experienced women from diverse careers and backgrounds. It included a self-defense session, holistic nutrition and wellness expert that provided the girls with information on how to live healthily, both physically and emotionally. It included a makeup session that taught girls how to apply professional, age-appropriate, natural-looking makeup. They crafted inspiration boards, they did yoga, and a lot more. And looking at this program, it seems to be the closest thing that exists to Camp Rosie today that's already out there. And in speaking with Mary O'Keefe, who's a reporter for CV Weekly and one of the main organizers of this event, they are looking to hold another Empowerment Day early this summer. They don't really have a date yet, but they would like to do it after school lets out for the year. And they're hoping to be able to hold 2 different empowerment days so that more girls can attend. They are interested in maintaining their presence in the north end of Glendale in the Crescenta Valley area, but are interested in expanding this into some sort of summit citywide. And support for this program, they didn't really give any sort of concrete asks, so to speak, for lack of a better word, but they said that support can come in various forms. This is gift bag swag, healthy lunch donations, or even, doing the summit down in for the larger Glendale area. That could be a type of support. The fiscal impact of this item as a whole would really be dependent on direction provided by the Commission and could vary greatly. The alternatives are outlined for you for your consideration on page 4 of this report. This is really just a preliminary conversation. This isn't setting anything in stone. This is just an opportunity for the commissioners to speak about these options, perhaps other options, and maybe give direction to staff to continue conversations with these organizations or other organizations. And that concludes staff's report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
Okay. As we know, we are advisory committee, but this program was a very special program for Commission on Status of Women to empower the young girls. As you mentioned, that is this not guaranteed, this one-day teen conference yet?
It's going to happen, Vice Chair Kwajayan. They just don't have a date selected yet, but
Okay.
they do plan on holding one this summer, according to Ms. O'Keefe.
As you were reading all this information, I think this is, right now, is the best that we can support them.
Chair Burns, may I make a comment?
Certainly.
I am in favor of alternative number 3, which is pursuing a partnership with both the Y and the Teen Empowerment Day organizers, especially since the Y cannot actually take over the program until 2017. I think they're both really viable options. Thank you to staff for the conversations you've had. And I really like the idea of being able to support Camp Rosie as soon as this summer, and then maybe in a longer, larger format after that.
Do we have the option to just vote on a community partner on an annual basis for Camp Rosie?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that I would, as I, like you, Commissioner Lamballe, concur. It could definitely be this particular group 2016, the YWC 2017, but because of what Camp Rosie meant to the Commission and because of where we don't know, in fact, where it's going, it might be interesting to have an annual discussion about Camp Rosie on the road, taking it on the road and partnering with these community partners differently. If
I may just add, Commissioner Miller and members of the Commission, one, I believe one of the goals that was expressed in previous conversations at the strategic meeting was that Camp Rosie would eventually be taken on by one organization. I mean, your idea is a very interesting idea, and I think it could work. The hopes of having one organization take Camp Rosie on is if there's a financial ask, it would be, for example, seed money, that it would be given once, it would be given up front, and then the hope would be that organization would be able to, over time, just basically incorporate that program into their own budget, into their own, annual continuing funds, and be able to sustain it for the community on their own. Going to an organization every single year might put extra financial burden on the commission, in that if there's a different organization having to do it every time, they might ask for that seed money every single year. So that just might be something to consider.
If I may just follow up to that, Chair Burns, that definitely is something to consider. That aside, that as we look further into it, we'll definitely go there. But staying on, let's say, for example, the YWCA, we know that they specifically have a focus and interest, a skill set in domestic violence, working with women and their children in those areas, and that particular group has that platform. Let's say that that's the part of Camp Rosie, in 2017, they want to really focus on the health and safety. It could almost mimic the report of the commission that we've just voted on. So that Camp Rosie, what I'm really trying to indicate is that our community partners might be more interested in working with us and taking on Camp Rosie when they can. The financial sector might say, we really like those aspects of the financial sector because that matches our skill set. It's easy to do. We can get involved. We can be experts at it, and we can move on. And we've contributed to the Commission on the Status of Women and Women and Girls in Glendale. The YWCA might say something different. I don't know that I even see much work at all in coordinating it. It's really that they can look at the curriculum of Camp Rosie and they can identify where they're the best expert and what they can contribute to Camp Rosie, where they're the expert in the skill set, and then the commission might say that's where we want to go this year. Don't know. Just not stuck on anything, just trying to think out of the box and not get stuck on one particular curriculum item.
May I make an additional comment?
Certainly.
Thank you, Commissioner Miller. I see where you're coming from. And I don't see these two proposed partners as mutually exclusive. I don't think we need to choose one over the other. One is 1 day, maybe 2 days, and the other is presumably would be longer, similar to the original Camp Rosie. So I think, in my view, it would be premature to cut off pursuing a partnership with one of them at this time in favor of the other one.
Yes.
What I meant for this 1 day, I know we were discussing this with YWCA until next year, 17. What I meant is at this time, if we can support, not. That's what my comment.
Do we have?
So we have to take action today in order to implement something for this summer. Is that right?
Well, it seems like for this summer it wouldn't work with YWCA, but possibly the Empowerment Day, some sort of summit or conference, for lack of a better word, that could very well be a possibility. Staff would look to the commission to provide direction on interest. If you'd like to put some sort of financial cap to it at this time, you are welcome to. There's not much information for you to go on, unfortunately, so you may want to wait till May. At that point, staff would be bringing back more information to you, and that could come with some.
Could they come and present also?
Absolutely. Ms. O'Keefe really wanted to be here tonight, but her daughter's getting an award from the schools, so she was unavailable, but is very much interested in working with the commission. I believe Ms. O'Keefe and Susan Hunt are the two primary organizers of that Teen Empowerment Day from a couple years ago.
It would seem that right now we don't have specifics we're not really able to put a dollar amount if we want to. The only thing at this point I think we might want to do would be to lend our name, but certainly hear from the organizers in May to find out what they might possibly be looking for, along with what the Commission could do for them.
And if you have some sense of what you think scale of support you would wish to, is the Commission interested in organizing and, working with them to support this group in organizing a summit for all of Glendale, or maybe this summer just support the summit that the Teen Empowerment Day they're doing in the Crescenta Valley portion of Glendale? That would also be some helpful feedback as far as what you think you would be interested in on that end of it. So we know we want to work with the YWCA. We know we want to work with the Crescenta Valley group. The question is, what level for this summer would the commissioners be interested in working with them?
May I comment, Chair Burns?
Certainly, Commissioner.
It would be my preference to stick with the current plan rather and learn about it and understand it and see how it goes, and then hopefully expand it beyond that. But I think we just don't have enough information now.
I agree with that.
So which alternative are we looking at?
I think, Madam Chair, if I may, I think from the discussion that we're hearing, I think you're looking for further direction. You're looking to provide staff with further direction to pursue the option with the Teen Empowerment Day, and to bring back a report and also invite the organizers to the Commission so that you can assess the level of support that you want to provide at the May meeting. Certainly if the requirement is that if the date is more impending and if we need to bring it back sooner, then we'll have to work with the organizers in doing that. But it sounds like at this meeting, all you're looking to do is provide direction to staff, a motion to provide direction with staff to pursue that initial relationship with the Teen Empowerment Day organizers.
And I would actually, my preference would be to go with alternative 3 so that the Y also knows, assuming everyone agrees, that we are interested.
Yeah.
So then the motion would be to
pursue a partnership with both the Y.
Right, without making a financial commitment at this time, without knowing fully what that would look like on either end.
Does that mean the Y is coming back in May to present?
This year.
Commissioner Miller, possibly. I believe even May might be too early given the fact that they will not have an executive director by then. They won't have an executive director until this summer. And once they secure their executive director, they're going to do a strategic plan. But at this point, I think what the YW, so I would say probably the August meeting would be more appropriate to invite the YWCA back, to be quite honest. But I believe taking action tonight to pursue a partnership with the YWCA would be a good faith step towards their direction, because they were really, they said they would really like the first opportunity to be considered for Camp Rosie as the new home of Camp Rosie, as the caretakers of Camp Rosie, so to speak.
Commissioners, could I have a motion on this alternative?
I make a motion to pursue a partnership with both the Glendale YWCA and the Teen Empowerment Day organizers, which is alternative 3 in the packet.
Could we have roll call, please?
We need a second.
I will second that.
Now could we have roll?
Yes. Commissioner Kojayan?
Yes.
Lambalot?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Perrion?
Yes.
Chair Burns?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Now, are we going on to the business agenda?
Yes. Under B, reports, information only. 1 is an update on the Association of California Commissions for Women's annual conference, and Commissioner Lambalot will provide an oral report as the representative for the Glendale CSW.
Thank you, Ms. Powers. I attended the ACCW meeting in Sacramento on January 22nd as the delegate from the Glendale Commission on the Status of Women. There were a number of commissions, both citywide, state, and county commissions present. More than 70 men and women, 70 men and women attended. It was quite a dynamic conference. Just a brief summary of it. The first speaker was the Honorable Holly Mitchell, who's a California senator from the 30th District. She spoke on various issues related to women and girls, and she is on the California State Commission on Women and Girls. She was very passionate and very dynamic and quite impressive. Then the day proceeded with 3 different panels, each presented by a different commission. So the City of Los Angeles Commission on the Status of Women and the San Francisco Department on the Status of Women partnered to hold a panel on CEDA, on the Gender Equity Policy Development and Implementation at the local level, and had some very interesting information. I've got I should mention that the website, the association's website at it's accwwomen.org. There's only one W, has the slide packets from the commission, from the presentations, some of the presentations, and they're very powerful. But it was very interesting to hear what was going on at various levels to implement that, including in the city of Los Angeles. My understanding is Mayor Garcetti has made it a real priority to make sure that there's parity in the number of women holding management positions in the city. The second commission was put on by the Santa Clara County Commission, having to do with jail monitoring. And they work with the local jail and do monitoring of women's needs, and apparently they've developed a pretty good partnership with the jail employees and management. And then the third panel, we actually had a lunchtime speaker, and it was Serena Khan, who is CEO of the Women's Foundation of California, who spoke on a number of topics. The title of the conference was Advocacy in Action, and so she spoke on that in part. Again, on the website is the full text of her remarks. And then the final panel of the day was it was called The Road Ahead, Challenges and Opportunities for Senior Women. I assisted with the this portion of the planning of the meeting, and we had a number of speakers on this panel, including women who are members of the California Commission on Aging. And the one statistic that was brought up by Mount St. Mary's on the poverty level of senior women struck a chord. I had no idea that senior women in the country, the state, are in the dire straits that they are for the most part, especially if they're alone. And then there was a great deal of synergism. I also have the program, which I can provide to Ms. Powers. In it, there is a summary of each commission's activities, which vary quite a bit. Not everybody contributed to it, but they're interesting to see. So I'll make sure that everybody gets that. And then the last speaker concluded with a saying, an African saying, that is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that really summed up the theme of the meeting.
Thank you very much.
Nice.
Next item on the agenda, please.
At 2 is an update on ad hoc committees. And at this time, if any of the ad hoc committees have any updates to provide, can be given at this time.
Do you have anything at all?
Well, the ad hoc committee I'm on with Chair Burns for the community affairs. We have worked on drafting a letter that's going to go to the 5103C organizations announcing the completion of the the Marymount report when that's done, and we will finalize that letter and send it out with the report when it's available.
Thank you. Commissioner Miller?
Nope. Our report, our ad hoc committee was presented.
Thank you. Commissioner Lavalade?
We don't have, but we are going to meet for our next meeting.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
No, me and Commissioner Diana, we are going to meet for our next meetings to present.
And then we are finished with our reports. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, please.
5 is Commissioner and staff comments.
Commissioner Lambelat, would you like to start with your comments?
I have no additional comments.
Vice Chair Kajoyan.
I think I mentioned, but on March 30th, me and Chair Burns, we are attending Mount St. Mary's, that they are presenting their 2016 annual report.
Thank you.
I would like to comment. I don't remember the exact date, but in January, I participated in the Youth Leadership Conference for Ethics and Character, and also saw Ex Officio Serrano. And this was a forum that brought together high potential Glendale high school kids and college kids, and also a lot of adults who are, I think, associated with the city. And we had very interesting breakout sessions where we had very real events that had occurred, and we were asked to take different sides of the argument, and it was very interesting listening to all the different perspectives, especially from our youth, and they were asked to discuss their perspectives, and it was a very good experience for the youth to really understand the tough decisions that leaders at every level in organizations are faced with day to day, and the right and wrong in the gray area itself. So it was really very inspiring for me, and I look forward to next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ex Officio Serrano?
I have no additional comments, although I didn't think about that. But it was my second year attending that conference, and so I was a part of the planning committee, so I didn't engage in the activities because we recycle them. Although I remember that we engaged in this activity where we had a partner, and we weren't able to look at each other. All you could do was, if I was giving the directions, I'd have to tell them to draw something. And you had to be very specific as to where on the page you draw. Did you do that or no? Oh, well, where you would draw it. And so at the end of the session, you'd see how communication is always so important, because the smallest detail could make all the difference. It's like drawing a circle here as to drawing a line here or something like that. And so those are the simple things that we discussed, and it's always a rewarding experience. And it's great for networking. I was so surprised when I saw her, because I was just caught off guard. So it's nice that people in our community really care about us, and it's a good experience.
And I think this links to, I'm sure, how this fosters the leadership that was noted in the report, that Glendale women are actually doing pretty well and better than the rest of the county.
Thank you. Any staff comments?
I have comments. I have comments.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
I thought you skipped over yourself.
Oh, Chair Burns, I just have a couple of comments. I wanted to just remind everyone, as we're in the last day of February, February 29th, that February is Heart Month, and that as spoken about or as identified in the lecture, that heart disease, which includes heart disease, stroke, and other cardiovascular diseases, is the #1 cause of death in the United States. So I have a few gifts for you, given that I work in a hospital and healthcare. I have one for staff as well. I have some red nail polish for you. You'll know where it came from because it says Glendale Adventist Medical Center. I also have some mints for you. Today was our Wear Red Day at work, and so there were a number of wonderful things going on. It was a heart-healthy month around the world, and different foods were served from different countries that were healthy, and there were a number of things that were giveaways, so I thought you might all enjoy that, so I will pass them down. I did also just want to let the commission know that because that Governor Brown has reappointed me to the California Occupational Therapy License Board. He reappointed me right before my term was up in January, and I'm pretty thrilled about this whole experience. And lastly, because we aren't together yet again before the summer, I did want to just remind everybody that March is Women's History Month, and that there are a lot of events going on both in Glendale and local cities and Los Angeles, and that everyone partake in Women's History Month. And that's all I have for comments.
Oh, thank you. Are there any staff comments?
No, thank you.
None at all?
It's nice to be back.
It's nice to have you. Congratulations.
That reminds me, I did want to remind the commission of the Glendale Mayor's Aranajarian's Prayer Breakfast. Thank you. It comes along March 10th. It's going to be held at the Women's Commission, or the Women's Commission. It's going to be held at the Civic. Doors open at 6, breakfast is 6:30, and the program starts at 7. We'll have Jim Fox as our keynote speaker, and he surely should bring a really wonderful message for us. Thank you for all your thoughts. I'm now requesting a motion of adjournment.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
I second.
Meeting is adjourned at
7.
7.
7 p.m.